Well, I'm grateful to everyone for making time in your day to come out and join us. Thanks very much, Ron, for this opportunity. Thanks, Jim, for all the coordinating efforts. I'd like to send a few shout outs before we begin. Obviously, the title of the talk is the title of my book with William. The research that the book extends from is a product of a 2009 Criminal Justice Research Center grant, and I just want to send them a shout out because I would not be sane to the degree that that word fits without the spiritual guidance and efforts and just mentoring of Professor Emeritus Ruth Peterson, just recently retired from the Department of Sociology and former head of the CGRC. The Philadelphia research team of Hakeem Ali, Thomas Ford, Dr. Christine Bryan, and Khalifa Shabazz, along with William, were instrumental in the planning and management and design of the instruments that were central to the development of these data. So thanks to the Philadelphia research team, and of course to William for the years of friendship and the process across time of spiritual growth. I could talk endlessly just about the two symbolic images that you see on either side, but perhaps we can come back to that as time allows. Where I'd like to begin is with that image. That is an image of my mother, Dr. Lois Price-Spratlen. We lost her in the day after, as Good Friday turns into the day between Easter Sunday's arrival of this year. She passed away. And I can only begin to describe the magnitude of grief that continues to inform my life and will forever. Miss her tremendously, and her footprints, fingerprints, are all over this text in a wide variety of ways. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. In the spirit of remembering, if we could, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd like to begin with a thought. Let's see, I'm not sure. Is this the one? Let me see. Should be a little USB. A little. Yeah, you know. Okay. Then I'll just. There. Cool. I'll work from here. I'd like to begin with a thought. And that thought is in three parts. First, again, the title of the book is Reconstructing Rage. Reconstructing Rage, Transformative Reentry in the Era of Mass Incarceration. A thought to begin. Constructive social change will bring certain tranquility. Evasions will merely encourage further turmoil. Those living in the ghetto always suffer most directly from destructive turbulence. When there is a rock-like intransigence or sophisticated manipulation that mocks, rage replaces reason. Those words were written in the final book before a form of rage led to his murder. In the book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, the last full book that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Published. He actually published it just a few months, basically a year prior to his murder in Memphis in 1968. And it informs much of the ideas that inform my book with William. It's rage replaces reason, yet rage can be reconstructed, because rage in effect can be used as a capacity building resource for that constructive social change that Reverend Dr. King spoke of. And that constructive social change is often driven or informed by the power of three. The power of three. Now, the power of three manifests in a variety of ways. I'll simply provide three critical examples that are central to this work and the book. Of course, we know the Holy Trinity within the Christian tradition: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That of a recognition of the sacred, of a sacred trio. And we know it from the standpoint of whole health or wellness: body, mind, spirit. A recognition of the interdependent relationships of these three that inform wellness as wholeness. And we know it also as, in terms of time, the truths of all time, and the truths of our lives as they unfold: past, present, future. Those three are interdependent within one another. And in point of fact, Reconstructing Rage as a text and the Reconstruction mission as I understand it is an interdependent relationship of these three things. The nature of how the sacred is engaged across religious and spiritual traditions. The nature of focusing on whole health, wholeness of body, mind, and spirit among its various affiliates. And a recognition that, true to the words of Professor John Henry Clark, that history is a current event. History is a current event, and there is a constant intertwining of past, present, and future. It is these three themes and the relationship between them that will unfold throughout our presentation time today. So the power of three, reflected in our book, Reconstructing Rage. And within it, there's three domains that I would focus on related to the book. And those are programs, pillars, and parts. From the standpoint of the organization and how rage is reconstructed across or within the lives of its affiliates, within the life of the organization, and through resource collaborations that inform the affiliations of Reconstruction unto other entities, organizations, and programs. The internal programs of the organization Reconstruction are central. AEA, Alumni, Ex-Offenders Association, which each of these will unfold further as we get further into the presentation. AEA, FFL, Fight for Lifers, and LEAD, Leadership, Education, Advocacy, and Development, the youth initiative of the organization. So, Fight for Lifers, true to its name, those serving life sentences within, absolutely, the precursor to it was absolutely vital in the initiation of the first cohort of Reconstruction. AEA, returning citizens coming home and nurturing a principled transformation within their lives, and then LEAD, either the youth, children of those former felons, or individuals serving life sentences, or youths themselves who have started their process through the school to prison pipeline that Reconstruction seeks to deconstruct. Three programs, three pillars. Reconstruction is organized around, to a significant degree, a community capacity building curriculum. That curriculum that is the critical foundation of the organization rests on three critical pillars: leadership development, situation management, and support system development. Again, each of these three will unfold further as we move through the presentation. Another critical power of three. And then the three parts of an organization, or parts of any entity. Culture, strategies of action, or of material and symbolic exchange. Community, part place, part pattern, and the relationship between place and pattern. And capacity building, Simply put, the process of maximizing the assets of all individuals who are involved, seeking to maximize the assets of all individuals involved. Because Reconstructing Rage was written as an institutional, in the tradition of institutional ethnography, where within traditional ethnography, the Clifford Geertz tradition, it's thick description of a location. Reconstructing Rage, we wrote Reconstructing Rage as an institutional ethnography with the organization being the primary center or unit of that thick description for analytic elaboration. And each of these three parts describe parts of the organization as well as the three parts of the book itself. And that trinity of threes and the book itself was an effort to explore and unfold the mission of Reconstruction Incorporated. The mission of the organization is changing ourselves to change the world, uniting the many to defeat the few. It's self-reflecting a trinity of sorts. Change, both the recognition of change, both at the individual and global level, micro and macro, and the interdependence between them. Unity or fellowship being a central means through which the process of change can unfold, and victory or intended outcome of sheer constructive social change consistent with the quote that we began with in the thought of Reverend Dr. King. Change, unity, and victory. And it is this mission that that trinity of threes that appeared on the earlier slide unfolds within the book. But the book is also grounded in a critical research tradition of exploring what of reentry can work, and how do we understand this process in an era of explosive mass incarceration from the early 70s when President Richard Nixon uttered in a re-election campaign in 71 uttered the term war on drugs. And he had his own set of obsessions, interesting guy. And it led to or contributed a momentum that manifested itself in explosive terms in the Reagan administration. And then the prison president of prison presidents in this country's history, Bill Clinton, that can sustain that explosive prison growth in his own sort of Southern compromise of sorts across his administrations. But the point is, the era of mass incarceration is informed across multiple administrations in that era. But the research question of the book is driven by an attempt to understand, in view of that era, can specific programs affect levels of social integration among released persons enough to affect the quality of them and their family and to reduce their criminal involvement. It's framed as a yes or no, but it's really what are the details beyond yes or no that Reconstruction Incorporated demonstrates. The answer from a yes or no standpoint is yes. Through effective strategy, through the effective use of community capacity building or asset maximization as a strategy of action, yes, specific programs through an organization can affect levels of social integration among returning citizens. Yes, culture, community, and capacity building can be used as effective resources to further the organization, engage the organizational mission. And yes, a grassroots, former felon-led, founded and led organization can nurture sustained principled transformations among the former felons themselves, their family members, and other community members with whom they interact. So that's the research question. James Lynch is a professor of, I believe he's still, at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And this is a piece in Criminology and Public Policy exploring the way in which this question can be answered. Reconstructing Rage is one answer to this question. Let's explore it further. Three-part overview, 3 parts of the organizational domain. Part 1, culture. The first 3 chapters focus on rage and resilience. The nature of there's a philosopher, Thomas Wenning, a Canadian philosopher, who speaks of and has written very thoughtfully of rage as a proactive, beneficial resource in the process of principled transformation. that conceptually is explored within the text. And resilience and its curriculum development is explored and detailed through the history of the first 5 years of the organization. And those first 5 years of the organization begin with a critical moment, which I'll get in, which actually, let me go ahead and do that now. Too many of my words and not enough of those of others. The nature of this moment, 1988, was actually years in the making, because 5 years before that 5 years, in Seattle, Washington, a group of African-American men came together. William brought them together, and the seed, or genesis, of what would become Reconstruction was actually planted at that time. But in 1988, William, new to the city, arrived and became aware of the third commemoration sponsored by the American Friends Service Committee of the Move tragedy. The Move tragedy, as you are far more familiar as locals than am I, occurred, it was actually the second unfolding of severe police tension between Move as an organization and the state. And it led to the 1985 sanctioning by the mayor of the dropping of a C4 grade bomb on a West Philadelphia block. And William and I were William was in the Peace Corps at the time. We were corresponding throughout it and just reacting, well, what in the world could lead to a cultural moment in which a government leader sanctions the dropping of a bomb in his own city. That's just beyond the beyond. In an effort to understand the answers to that question, along with many other elements, William came to the city, and in 1988, third year commemoration of the American Friends Service Committee occurred. At that event, William stood up and said the following, which is explored in our prologue. I want to speak on the word ostracize. Most of us are very shocked walking the streets when we see a young black man. White people, they move over when they see a young black man. A lot of people in here would do the same thing. We talked about hatred, and we say don't harbor hatred. I'm angry. And unfortunately or fortunately, I've learned how to deal with my hatred. I've learned how to deal with my anger. But for the most part, young black men have not. At this point, I want to offer us a solution. I challenge the organizations here to include in your program a mechanism for young black men to deal with the hatred that we have. Otherwise, it will continue to resurface. Be it Move, be it me, if I walk out of here and say something that is not appropriate, the bomb will be dropped again. Because we are not allowed to express that anger. So if there are any organizations here, I will volunteer time to help implement those programs, and I'm willing to deal with those causes and help people implement solutions on those issues around black men and how we are ostracized from this society.
Thank you.
And in response to those words, true to the applause reflected in Ron's choice here, Mary Norris responded with action, organizational action. She was an administrator within AFSC, she was a co-organizer of the event, and she, as William was leaving, responded to him and said, I think I've got somebody who would be worthwhile for you to talk with. And besides me, besides Mary Norris. Speaking as Mary Norris. And that led to Reconstruction being a program within AFSC. I'll explore more of that in a bit. But I wanted to celebrate the cultural moment of the organization reflected in the first 5 years, the genesis of which was that moment in 1988. Part 2, chapters 4 through 6, on the unfolding of community within the organizational mission. That's reflected or represented in the experiences of women within the organization. An organization understood as a men's organization, but very much family-centered and would not exist without the profound contributions of women to the organizational mission and within the organization. Let's explore that further. The second 5 years of the history of the organization, and then youth initiatives, the lead chapter, reflecting community. Okay, and part 3, capacity building. The next decade of the organization, 88 through 2007, the more recent years reflected in the best practices of these most recent years. And then a summary and a consideration of future and potential collaborations reflected in chapter 9. The book ends with an epilogue written by Dr. Ed Ryan, who is who has made his career as an administrator within the Ohio State Department of Corrections. He is also a colleague of mine in the Department of Sociology, an adjunct at Ohio State. And he wrote a thoughtful epilogue that is a dialogue of what are the ways in which these dynamics can inform public policy and both penal policy as well as larger communal political policy beyond the institution itself. So that's the overview of the book. Let's outline the talk that remains. Let me first lay out a landscape before I get to the details. The landscape is the era of mass incarceration that I made passing reference to related to presidential politics. But let me speak of the era in greater detail and its processes and characteristics, the landscape. And then I'll deal with the how. How does Reconstruction reconstruct rage? Will be explored in greater detail beyond the overview that I just provided. And the dialogue, who will then move into a consideration, an overview of current initiatives, and then William will take over and move, or however the Reconstruction affiliates, other Reconstruction affiliates, will further that dialogue as we move forward, designing what's next. So let's start with the landscape, brief overview. Love the symbolism of this, of the Statue of Liberty behind the bars of the American flag. So what is the meaning of Old Glory in this context? Okay, mass incarceration, what is it? What is this era? Let's deal with it. Let's deal with a definition to specify the era as context. Mass incarceration refers not only to the criminal justice system, but also to the larger web of laws, rules, policies, and customs that control those labeled criminals both in and out of prison. And more vitally, well, not more vitally, but equally central, once released, why both in and out, once released, former prisoners enter a hidden underworld of legalized discrimination and permanent social exclusion. These words in this definition are in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, very thoughtful and engaging, necessary exploration of these very themes from the standpoint and perspective of a legal scholar in terms of public policy on various initiatives. And she ends it with an affirmation of a broad-based social movement informed by community action organizations that as a necessary next step to address these challenges, especially of the outside of prison in mass incarceration. Reconstruction is in part an answer to a necessary change, but that's the definition of the era. Let's characterize it statistically by placing the United States in a global context. From the International Center for Prison Studies, 2008, we can see the United States is by far the global leader in incarcerating people, as we all know. And comparative nation states, well, there really are none, but the ones that come closest are Russia and Rwanda. If you are the company you keep, and we have a variety of critiques of the former Soviet state and Rwanda, as reliable penal statistics will allow, that speaks to a real challenge for the nature of what a participatory democracy is, or any form of democracy. And here's England, and here is China, our point of reference or preferred other in some circles, that has an incarceration rate far lesser than ours. So the point. From a global standpoint, the U.S. is the global leader, 5% of the world's population and a quarter of its prison population. So from a global state, that's an overrepresentation where it is unsettling to attach the term democracy to global context. Comparative context within the United States. This is from basically the Bureau of Justice Statistics data contrasting race and ethnic rates of incarceration. 2010 data, Prison Policy Initiative. And the point is that African Americans are about 6 times, are incarcerated at about 6 times the rate of whites, and Latinos at about 2.5 to 3 times the rate of whites. So it is, incarceration, as we know, is highly disproportionate in its representation and participation. The year of mass incarceration reflected both comparatively globally and comparatively racially and ethnically within the U.S. So that's the landscape. Let's consider now the how, the meat, if you will, of the presentation. What does Reconstruction do? And how does Reconstructing Rage unfold that? So let's deal with the details of part 1. Page 1 of chapter 1 begins with a test, begins with a cultural test, in the words of someone from across the water. The mood and temper of the public, these are the first words that the reader is greeted with. The mood and temper of the public in regard to the treatment of crime and criminals is one of the most unfailing tests of the civilization of any country. Extending from an unfailing faith that there is a treasure, if only you can find it, in the heart of every man. These are the symbols which in the treatment of crime and criminals mark and measure the stored up strength of a nation and are the sign and proof of the living virtue in it. This test of the civilization, the virtue of a civilization, rests in how we understand individuals who were understood through the label criminals and their return. Those words were said when an equivalent, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, was in the British equivalent of the House of Representatives, House of Commons, way back in 1910. History is a current event. And the truths of this test of civilization is in many respects more relevant now to the 21st century US than it was then, or certainly as relevant now as it was in the British context of 1910, when eventually Prime Minister Winston Churchill was a member of the House of Commons. So let's explore that test. Culture within the organization. It's a symbolic representation of the sacred circle. Reconstruction Incorporated of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was founded on the sacred circle, both as symbolic and material structure. On multiple levels. The sacred circle is grounded very squarely in ancient African and First Nation cultural traditions, where the issue of the sphere, there's a First Nation charity that I contribute to, and on the back of an envelope it had a wonderful treatise of the symbolic virtue of the circle, and it's somewhere packed in my stuff, and I was trying to find it. It was just a lovely, just a pure, clear representation of the value of circles and the issues of equidistance across the geometric equidistance across radii and the comparability across all points. But yet it's rooted very squarely in the spiritual tradition of that South Dakota nation. So sacred circle, a symbolic and material resource that informs the founding of Reconstruction. As it prioritizes shared respect among all participants, reciprocity, the nature of sacred exchange, the giving and the receiving, and consensus, let us come to a shared investment and understanding of viable and valued outcome. And symbolically, I hope we'll notice that true to the nature of the symbol, we in this circular room, which is kind of cool, are the sixth chair of this circle as the image is represented. And Reconstruction reflects that this priority of shared respect, reciprocity, and consensus. Let's deal with the dynamics that unfold across the part one of the book, and its cultural foundations. Founded by William Goldsby and a select group of allied others. That's a note to me to read what I read to you from the prologue. It grounds the moment of 1988 and the critical moment of challenge and discovery. Discovery for William, discovery for the American Friends Service Committee, discovery for all those in attendance in commemoration of the MOVE tragedy that were there to hear those words, discovery on multiple levels, and the founding, the genesis moment of the organization. It began in 1988 as a satellite program within the American Friends Service Committee. Within those first three chapters, and in particular chapter 3, it unfolds the many dynamics grounded in the term or theme of tempered inclusion, a set of profound tensions that informed both William's value to AFSC, how he was responded to, but also the levels of participation that one was excluded from, or the nature of leadership, access, and resources that one was denied. There were a set of those dynamics that are explored. But it began in '88, and across those first 3 years as a program led to its incorporation, because the tempered inclusion led to a tension of alienation through the mid-Atlantic region of AFSC. And it led to a fax being sent that basically said, the Mid-Atlantic region of the American Friends Service Committee can no longer support this particular issue. In effect. And two critical individuals, central to the history and work of the American Friends Service Committee. Barbara Moffett, one of the center women of Reconstruction, and Bill Meek, may they both rest in peace, were critical resources in seeing the vision and image and partnering with William and getting him together with a lawyer to start the papers of incorporation as that fax was being, in effect, as that fax was being sent. So it was incorporated in April of 1991 and signed, the Articles of Incorporation were signed by 3 individuals, 2 of whom were women, including Phyllis Jones Carter, the first and longest serving board president of Reconstruction. And structure. The culture of an organization can be understood through multiple domains or elements, and through history and structure. Those are elements of its historical foundation, and its structure is grounded in a set of profound contradictions. One, that the very origin moment of the organization was grounded in profound tragedy, life loss. Most of the many of the individuals who lost their lives in that MOVE bombing were children, 14 and younger. And yet, the commemoration of that moment led to the statement being shared, the challenge being rendered, and being responded to with shared respect by Mary Norris and soon Barbara Moffett and Bill Meek. The tempered inclusion across those 3 years. Yes, you are a program. Well, should you have space within the office? What does that mean? If you are given office space, what does that mean? Longer term programs have not had access to the space that you are being provided with. What does that mean? What are the dynamics of symbolic and material? The symbolic material tension throughout those 3 years. But all the while.
Templeton, I think you mean AFSC, not AFDC.
Oh.
Just,
Okay.
it brings up all different kinds of,
absolutely.
thoughts and memories.
I'm annoyed with those mistakes. Yeah, AFSC. is what is intended here. Yet throughout, the organization continued to move in terms of Williams' leadership and as a collective, the individuals who he brought together. And the larger mission of the organization is family-centered, intergenerational, and consensus-driven, was also set in motion through a set of collaborative actions with AFSC, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, the Social Justice Initiative Bread and Roses, and even the Philadelphia DA's office. And those collaborative actions are explored in greater detail. Point within culture, however we understand the material and the symbolic and how they unfold, these are the dynamics of the historical foundation and structure that are central to the organization's formative steps. Let me move on. Okay, and I want to celebrate the cultural strength of shared vulnerability and in the formation of the organization through a single quote of one of the critical organizers of the Alumni Ex-Offenders Association, Cameron. I really got into AEA. I really enjoyed coming to the meetings, talking about what was going on. And if I had a struggle, I didn't have a problem with coming, sitting down with whoever, whatever members was there, and discuss what was going on, and take some suggestions, and get the feedback, and reveal that idea that I was looking for. Because it wasn't nothing I had to hide. I don't feel that any problem I have is too great to ask for help. You cannot get nowhere in life thinking you know everything. Among the powers of this quote in my eyes are that the process of the revelation, the idea that he was looking for is revealed. That revelation unfolds through reciprocity. What was going on and taking some suggestions and getting the feedback. Then the idea that he was looking for unfolds through the collective fellowship of the other former felons in the room. Now, in this particular moment, actually Cameron is reflecting on something that occurred after the first 5 years of the organization, but it effectively represents AEA as a programmatic initiative and the cultural strengths of shared vulnerability that inform each of the 3 programs of the organization, including especially AEA. Okay, so 3 things. First, part 1, culture. Exploring philosophical utility of rage as a resource in capacity building, and its relationship to resilience, the process of curriculum development, and the first 3 pillars of the organization that are different from the 3 pillars of the current capacity building curriculum. But the formation of the current pillars was grounded in this initial set of steps of curriculum development explored in Chapter 2. And the first 5 years, temperate inclusion within and then outside of AFSC. On to part 2, and an exploration of community on multiple levels through women's experiences, the second 5 years, and the formation of LEAD as the youth initiative. Tons of thoughts, but I want to represent this particular phrase. I was given permission by my father to use this as the title for Chapter 4, the chapter exploring women's experiences within Reconstruction. There is no progress without a woman in it. And that phrase was the title of my grandmother's speech to the Western Tennessee Women's Baptist Auxiliary in 1937. Wife of a Baptist minister, my grandfather, and she was speaking. There's a whole separate piece of work in surrounding just that speech that I look forward to doing, because she was a feminist before her time. She was an amazing thinker, and this happened to be one of the speeches that she gave, and we used it as the title. Dad allowed us to use it as a title for the women's experiences within Reconstruction. And it aptly represents women's experiences, the community building domains that women have been central to. I say Audre Lorde's echoes here because Audre Lorde I was introduced to, an amazing thinker we couldn't afford to lose, who passed due to cancer back in '94. And she wrote a critical essay in 1984. I should have written it down. Transforming Silence into Language and Action. The transformation of silence into language and action. And in that 1984 speech, that sentiment that she conveys, the nature of voice visibility, voice visibility and its relationship to action. Both in the bell hooks tradition of just speaking is in and of itself an action towards profound transformation, and the engage, especially when those words are engaged in fellowship with others, to further shared mission through specific programs and protocol. This chapter explores the women's experience. Other Mothers is from the Black feminist tradition, characterized as it's the language of Pat Hill Collins through her book, Black Feminist Thought, but it also informs or aptly characterizes the experiences or expressions of women's contributions to the organization, and center women are three critical individuals who were absolutely vital to the growing mission of the organization. Barbara Moffett, Lucinda Hudson, and Phyllis Jones Carter. Again, Phyllis Jones Carter was was among the first three signees of the Articles of Incorporation of the organization. And this chapter explores a right set of tensions and challenges, including the very engagement of the organizational mission, alienating persons. This alienation refers to therapeutic alienation, the way in which the very process that Cameron referred to in a celebratory way led multiple women to experience them as alienating from the organization. Why should I come back to be torn down? No one said that overtly, but that was the implication of the level of alienation that was experienced, that emerged from a focus group of women that we had as one part of the data collection within the project. And the challenges of critical mass. So few individuals being in a position to share leadership and really change the larger view of the organization as a prevailing men's organization, yet women being central to it. Okay. And yet this process of women's experiences is perhaps best characterized in the reflections of Jamila Vaughan within that focus group, who said the following: amidst those challenges, amidst those tensions, amidst those alienations, amidst that process, that mixture of quality resource exchanges, progress and capacity building unfolded, leading some individual to experience the following, including Jamila's. While engaging with others who have been involved with Reconstruction, I've developed a voice I never knew I had. And I took that voice and extended it to my family, some who were incarcerated. I didn't know how to do that in the past. Once I became part of Reconstruction, it really shaped me and developed me into a stronger woman, definitely into an activist. And also, I'm not so quick to judge others. That's how Reconstruction has helped me. Specification of the multiple domains or means of what has been gained as an asset through Reconstruction affiliation, and the recognition that it's rooted in voice, vision, and action of fellowship, extending from the individual to the family and beyond. Women's experiences within the organization. I had one more thing that I gotta send as a shout out. Oh, to women's experiences. To say that women have played a central and centering role both acknowledges yet understates their importance. A letter from William to an aunt in 1983 was a valuable catalyst for his search to further develop an organization to address the challenges of black men. The decision and actions of Mary Norris and Barbara Moffett, the AFSC administrators I referred to earlier, noted above, were central to the momentum of the organization's earliest years. Phyllis Jones Carter was the first and longest standing board president and was one of the 3 signers of the 1991 papers establishing Reconstruction's 501c3 nonprofit status, with 2 of these 3 signees being women. And in 1993, Ms. Emma Ward chose to sell a sturdily built, structurally sound brick 6-unit apartment building in North Philadelphia to the organization for the grand total of $1. It was this building that established Reconstruction's neighborhood home, the reentry space for former felons from the first Graterford prison cohort to establish their residential reentry roots for principal transformation. We consider a few of the other mothers of Reconstruction Incorporated, and then it goes on to explore that. But I wanted to call attention to the choices of multiple women, but in particular Ms. Emma Ward, making a building available to the organization, and through the making of that, through that choice, the first Graterford cohort that emerged at the cusp of the first and second 5 years of the organization, where Reconstruction, led by William and a critical mass of others, entered into the Graterford prison, SCI Graterford, and with the leadership, under the leadership of the Director of Treatment, Thomas Stahalik, and the prison superintendent, Donald Vaughn, and the leadership of an internal group of primarily lifers within the prison. And the reason that that is particularly profound is that under state law, no prisoner is allowed to make any form of decision-making outcome on the life experience of another prisoner. Yet, through the collective leadership and the consensus building, and actually reciprocity, because there was a recognition on the part of both Mr. Stahalik and Mr. Vaughn of the resource that Reconstruction was bringing to the prison, as well as what the nature of reciprocity. And as a result, the lifers were central to the leadership of selecting the first cohort of 24 individuals, two-time violent felons, at risk of the third strike. This was occurring in the era of the momentum of the 3 strikes and you're out laws that is now bankrupting California, and led to the Supreme Court decision for them to reduce their prison rolls. That momentum of that part of the mass incarceration era was challenged through Reconstruction by focusing on two-time violent felons at risk of the third strike within 18 months or less of their release date, coming into fellowship with one another and with Reconstruction as an organization. And through that affiliation, preventing the risk of the third strike and nurturing their principal transformation, starting from within the prison. And I want to send a shout out to the documentary put together primarily through the efforts of many, including Patrick Murray, but finished in 1996, and it effectively documents or represents, has several moments of the within prison experience of the first Graterford cohort. It's profound. I hope that everyone has a chance to take a look at it soon. Point. The process of this process of women's experience and transformation reflected in Jamila's quote is also consistent with the dynamics or principal transformation experienced by many others. Let's see. One other element of community of focus is the chapter on youth. And this chapter focuses on the experiences of children and is titled from Isaiah 11:6. It's actually, as we know from the King James Version, it's actually, and a little child shall lead them. But the idea is the role of children or youth in leadership. There's a whole interesting thought that also informs our selection of this as the chapter title, because that part within that verse of Isaiah, it's a set of dynamic tensions, and the wolf shall lay down with the lamb, and it's a recognition of curious partnerships that are potential, that can be potentially realized through the manifestation of God's grace, in effect. That's my take. I'm not a theologian, but that's my take on the sort of symbolic meaning. But it's rooted very squarely in the potential in this potential centrality of youth leading both themselves as well as adults across the way, of course. First youth initiative began with Brothers Strengthening Families in 1994, and the initiatives of Hakeem Hudson, who was then 22 years old, and experiencing the tensions of being a young father, striving to make a relationship work, striving to make family work, striving the process and the role of fatherhood, and the multiple tensions of marginalization that are often experienced by young African American men in a globalizing, deindustrializing economy. And among the other youth initiatives that soon followed included others within the North Philadelphia neighborhood that Reconstruction is centered in. 20 Dove Club was another group of young males, who were then mentored by the slightly older young men who were in Brothers Strengthening Families, and the Young Girls Initiative, Divas with Attitude, that also moved forward. And throughout these initiatives, be it Brothers Strengthening Families, be it 20 Dove Club, or Divas with Attitude, throughout, among the trinity of resources central to the youth moving forward, leading themselves and contributing to the leadership of the organization as a whole, was recognizing their own resilience, coming into fellowship with one another, and being driven by a vision rooted in, how do I do this fatherhood thing? And recognizing that that's not a rhetorical question. And that other individuals in fellowship, other young individuals can also come into fellowship with one another and define the answers with clarity, with accuracy, with vision. That's one of multiple examples. And I want to send a shout out to LEAD in particular, and that's reflected in chapter 6 of the book. This is the only image that is in the book, and it is of the Clubhouse. The Clubhouse has an engaging history in and of itself. That is a picture from 2005. It looks somewhat different today. The point is, it's a physical structure that began in a period of organizational dormancy when William saw a group of youth picking up wood to build a clubhouse. Among the iconic, sort of informal rites of passage that, especially among males, but increasingly regardless of gender, that is experienced in childhood, coming together with a group of folk and saying, let's build a clubhouse, right? Iconic stuff. And William saw, having seen these young men, children, said, what are y'all doing? How about let's do this differently? And suggested for them a strategy of action where they, instead of using those resources, build a resource base to build what became this clubhouse. Brought them together, established a leadership group, held regular meetings, introduced them to the process of skill building, literally in terms of carpentry, etc., and informed in partnership with the efforts of Patrick Murray, whose quality skill is a master carpenter, and among many of his skill sets, and participated in the leadership of mentoring these young boys to build this multi-level structure with a variety of purchased and donated materials that they secured the resources for. Point. What could be viewed by others as acts of vandalism actually became a collective initiative of capacity building among these young men. And that by doing so, moved these young men and the organization beyond mere prevention to effective outreach across generations and to a critical awareness of those young men, of themselves, their own leadership ability, etc., and the skills that they gained from that. Now, that has every symbolic, this is both material and symbolic from a cultural standpoint, and communal in the unfolding of how the youths came together. So culture and community. The outcome is a complicated one because the nature of the current circumstances of many of those youths who participated in that, it's a diverse range of outcomes, and it acknowledges that bring youth together, nurture a capacity building environment, and beneficial outcomes increase. The likelihood of beneficial outcomes certainly increase, but the vagaries of concentrated poverty, the imposition of the police state, the imposition of mass incarceration and its dynamic outcomes, it cannot necessarily prevent all individuals from penal institution. But point, Clubhouse continues to exist and represents both the material and symbolic representation of effective culture and community.
Jonathan, where is it physically located?
It is physically located just north of Williams Home. That is on Huber Street, and its official address would be 3331. 3331 Huber Street. And there's a profound dynamic history of that, I'm not sure, about how that space was acquired. And the opposition, expressed opposition to William and Reconstruction having access to that space, aspects of potential vandalism that informed the timing of its construction, meaning individuals were, well, it's just complicated. Point. Even in an environment where a block is benefiting from the process of concentrated resource development and growth, some individuals, either within that block or beyond it, can act against that very effort. There are a variety of resource tensions that inform any constructive social change initiative, and the Clubhouse is no different. But yeah, it continues to stand. There's actually a more formal fence in front of it now, and it's painted and the like, but it continues to stand and is a testament to that communal mission, the achievement of that communal mission. So culture, community, and let's address the third piece of this, capacity building. From a chapter standpoint, the next 10 years of the organization, recent best practices, and then some future collaborations, which will lead us into the dialogue. And I'm beyond time, so I apologize for going over time, but I'll do my best in being efficient here.
How much over are you?
It's 11:10.
Well, the lunch isn't coming till 11:45, is that correct?
Yep.
So we actually have till 11:45. And then, of course, we can continue the conversation all through lunch.
Absolutely.
So we're here till 1 o'clock.
Okay. I will bring quick closure to this, William.
He watches the clock on everybody.
I can't see the clock. No.
Sometimes you still watch it though.
You're absolutely right.
Capacity building, part 3, the vision statement. This is a particular moment from an annual meeting a few years ago of Reconstruction, and articulates in an image the vision statement of the organization. Regardless of one's past, we value each voice being informed by equal access to education, legal rights, health care, and comprehensive political participation. We, Reconstruction, recognize the excellence in every human being and facilitate a process where our members, along with members of allied organizations, value their own potential. When this is true, that person is prevented from being a commodity to be auctioned off by the prison industrial complex. This is capacity building. The formal definition within capacity building of Robert Chaskin and Sudhir Venkatesh and others, but this aptly characterizes that definition because it's rooted in a recognition of self-worth that is grounded in the collective value of that self and group worth to further and resist actions that might seek to act against the values or expression of that self and collective worth. Very much the statement that's more effectively represented in Williams' words. And the final piece of from a capacity building and part standpoint is the three pillars of the curriculum. Again, they inform each of the three organizations: Alumni Ex-Offenders Association, Fight for Lifers, and LEAD, Leadership, Education, Advocacy, and Development. The three pillars: leadership development, situation management, and support group development. This focuses on the individual, the immediate contextual, and the larger affiliate or communal and beyond. So a recognition of micro-macro across the three pillars. It is engaged through each meeting. This curriculum informs each and every meeting in some particular way and shapes. Let me just let this in there. The words: we believe that each human being is sacred and is valued to themselves, the family, the community, and to society. There are a variety of ways in which this particular curriculum informs the organization as a whole. Chief among them, there is a formal capacity building training that exists that a few in the room have actually taken. In addition, this informs the mechanics of how any given meeting is actually unfolds. And the larger point is at the individual, affiliate, and communal levels. There's the recognition for focusing on what are the assets, how can those assets be maximized, and what are the ways in which fellowship can be utilized as a critical means through which reciprocity can further the achievement of constructive social change. This situation management pillar, just to focus on it for a bit, acknowledges that instead of focusing on what is often defined as crisis management or crisis prevention, is instead an acknowledgement that these are simply situations, processes, patterns of relationships that manifest themselves as what we understand as crisis, but can be furthered and addressed proactively and beneficial to the outcomes and capacity building benefit of the collective group. So we return, we end at the beginning. The original research question of James Lynch was, can specific programs affect levels of social integration among released persons enough to affect the quality of life for them and their family and to reduce their criminal involvement? The answer is yes. These are the three answers that we covered before. Each of the three domains within the organization, culture, community, and capacity building, represent and reflect the means through which these yes answers unfold. The three programs of the organization, Alumni Ex-Offenders Association, Fight for Lifers, LEAD, are the structural programs through which the affiliation processes or the answers to these questions manifest within a group-specific focus. And there are a set of best practices that we end on focusing on in Chapter 8 that I will not, that we can recite as time allows into the future. But let me end with the words of a single affiliate who aptly represents the ways in which reciprocity, nature of sacred exchange, and these 6 best practices reflect the organization mission.
Not me. No. Older me.
Dion Morrison, we used to say Dion Morrison Sr., but Dion is actually not a junior, but anyway. And I want to be respectful of that, but Dion Morrison's father, in an interview, suggested the following. He was also central to the founding of AEA. It's truly amazing to me the selflessness of the participating individuals in Reconstruction. Haven't run across anything else like it. The ability to pull together and assist in any way possible, to just give. If Reconstruction put in any time or effort with an individual, they only ask that that individual come back and do something. Likewise, that was given to them for the next person coming through the doors. And then he, within the body of that interview, exemplified a number of ways in which he had experienced the benefit of this expression of reciprocity, and then the ways in which he then came back to the organization and contributed to the organization to assist the next person coming through the doors. Reciprocity as a critical best practice within the organization. Okay, so we considered the landscape of mass incarceration. We demonstrated through culture, community, and capacity building how the three programs structurally and historically, history is a current event, allowed Rage to be reconstructed. Let's further the dialogue of designing what's next. Chapter 9 considers a set of transformative potential collaborations at that particular, and initiatives that were currently taking place. At that time at which the book was, we were bringing closure to the book, that included a set of innovations that we simply didn't have the resources to maintain. A reentry assistance program, or RAP, in which elder individuals who were aging out of the special populations incarceration were being released, and Reconstruction, one program within Reconstruction, served as a critical bridge, affiliating with their families, bringing their families together to assist in that reentry process. A set of transformative collaborations that became not sustainable from the standpoint of resources, just not enough of critical mass to sustain that initiative. The designing what's next was furthered with a policy-oriented dialogue reflected in the epilogue of a longtime prison administrator who's also an academic and a product of the Rutgers program, actually right down the street, and engages in a public policy critique, demonstrating the ways in which Reconstruction provides a means for informing both penal policy, opening up to the potential for other prisoners having leadership over other prisoners within the prison, in affiliation with outside organizations and prison administrators to further given transformative curriculum and other policy potentials. And then the potential collaboration currently with the Villanova, the Pew Foundation, and others that are unfolding as we speak. Okay, and we end with these words near the very end. A number of symbolic representations. If we are to nurture the direction in which the arc of justice bends, we must resist the many painful realities of the untrue dream of mass incarceration and its collateral consequences in new and creative ways. Communities will be made safer and more whole through principled transformations being nurtured by Reconstruction and other progressive organizations throughout the United States and the world. Toward that end of furthering the dialogue begun, I thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to our comments, your comments, questions, and furthering the dialogue.